Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video, and in this video I'm going to be going over Zachary as a character and basically breaking down how I think you should approach building this character when it comes to attack teams, defense teams, so on and so forth. This is a character that was obviously a former promo, very strong character, but he has recently made his way into the bit shop, so I know a lot of people have got their hands on him, so maybe you're kind of interested in how to build him. Now there are three ways to build Zachary, but I'm only going to show you one. The three ways are offensive, defensive, or both. It's kind of hard to do both, but we're gonna do the both situation, where it's a character where you can use them on your defense team and your attack team, because as you may know, combat mods, you can only have one set of combat mods, so you have to make it so it's kind of balanced between offensive and defensive. So he's got some survivability in there, but you can make him fully offensive if you so wish. However, that is not how I personally think is the way to go, but pretty much all you need to do to make it that way is change the set to attack set instead of the HP set, which we're going to use when we get onto the mods. Now, when it comes to Zachary's skill upgrades, we'll go to his mythic abilities. He only primarily needs Bloodbath and Nimble. If you have the character to limit break 2, you can get Nimble 2, and it obviously stacks with Nimble 1, so definitely worth doing. But those are the only really important ones for usability on attack and defense. Nimble's mainly a defensive one, but it is a nice little bonus for an attack team. The other one that's pretty decent is Not So Fast. If you want to use them on a defense team, it will basically make fast teams less viable. In the past, this wasn't that important, but if you do have a Tara defense leader, obviously that would semi-protect the tough characters in your defense team, because the fast characters in the opponent's attack team potentially won't have attack buffs in the first 2 turns, so it will just give them a bit more survivability early on. Now, agility I don't think is important at all. It does not change the amount of damage that his bleed's going to do. His bleed is purely based on his stat on the left hand side. Whatever you get that stat to with 1535s, weapon, mods, leader skill, that is what the bleed is based off of from the initial passive Bloodbath. Nothing else matters. Agility is just going to affect his signature move and his basic attacks. It isn't going to affect his rush. However, it still is actually pretty decent if you have got, a lot of military supplies, or you do rely heavily on Zachary in certain teams, because once aggro gets going, it's going to multiply with agility, and there's going to be like a nice little bit of a boost of damage there. But I would not say it's a priority. So it's Bloodbath first, without a doubt. That's pretty much the main thing about Zachary. Nimble second, Not So Fast third if you are going to be using him on a defense team, and agility pretty much last if you're only going to use him on an attack team. Now, next up we have the combat mods, and like I said, we're mainly going to do a kind of like every team character. We want to use it on attack and defense, so it's going to have some offensive capability but also some survivability. If you don't want to have the survivability, which I'm going to be adding, you just change pretty much the HP set for attack set. It isn't going to make that much of a difference when it comes to the amount of bleed that he's going to do, but it's not going to be terrible. As you probably know, mod stats only change the percentage from the base stat. If we look at the stats on the left-hand side, it just changes from the base stat. It doesn't multiply with weapon, it doesn't multiply with leader score or anything, so it doesn't get stronger the more things you have when it comes to mods. But it is pretty decent, just a little boost on the side. We're going to go with HP set, like I said, but we are going to go with an attack mod. I have got a reasonably decent one, I think 23%, so I'm going to go with 23%. Now, because the top right-hand corner, attack versus, does not affect the bleed, kind of like how I did my Andrea build, I'm going to do defense versus, also because we do want to use him on the defense team. So I'm going to use my defense versus mods, and I've got a defense versus strong. He is a fast character. You want to protect him against strong characters ideally. Strong attack teams are probably going to be attacking Tara teams quite a lot more, and strong attack teams are going to be like a bit more viable now, like Rick, Michonne 2000, Valkyrie in the future, like nice little combos there. Now, the bottom right hand corner mod is kind of up to you. It really depends on what team you're going to use him on. If you're using him on a Tara team, does not really need bleed resist so much, but if you're not using him on a Tara team, you may want to use bleed resist. If you're using him on attack teams and you're using him with an attack leader like Negan, you don't necessarily need things like taunt resist or confuse resist, because it's mainly the first 2 to 3 turns that Zachary teams are really, potent, and obviously Negan's going to protect you from those 2 things in the first 2 turns. So personally, I just generally go with stun resist on this sort of character, but you could find a more important one for you. You could see an issue, especially on an attack team. It's easier to identify if there's a particular control that just seems to be coming up on Zachary. I don't notice days too much. I don't notice impairs too much. So he getting his stuff off is not a problem. But yeah, so I think it's a good idea to just run stun resist. So get a reasonably decent stun resist in there, or a meta resist in the future. But basically like bleed resist right now if you're not using him on a Tara team. Now the bottom left hand corner, I have tried out a couple of options, and the one I landed on was a damage over time. You can either go with bleed or you can go with burn. The burn obviously generally is going to be a higher percentage because burn does do higher percentage. It also is better because it lasts longer, and if you do take out a character, it goes to another character. However, if you have a character that does burn in the same team as Zachary, let's say you've got Andrea 2000 or any other burn character, this will get superseded and it'll be kind of useless in that situation. I find the bleed one pretty decent. I'm just going to use bleed. It's good to have one bleed or burn mod on a character that you think has decent survivability on an attack team. And Zachary is someone who gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger as the fight goes on. Because he's got an aggro specialist skill, his attack boost is just going to get higher and higher and higher. That's going to amplify his basic attacks. That's going to amplify his signature move. That's going to amplify his rush, but it's also going to amplify this mod. So his bleed's going to get higher and higher and higher and higher from this mod. So eventually you're going to be able to take out pretty much any character as long as Zachary himself stays alive. With the Guardian Shields and stuff that he can proc, he's got a decent chance to have that happen. So we see his stats, and we can maybe see like the issues that we maybe face in the teams. For instance, if he's in a Tara team, he's going to have a lot less defense, but he has got defense on his base weapon, which we will get into in a second, just in terms of where I would go with the base weapon. But you could say you want to just stack his HP as high as possible to counter potential burn or bleed when he's on an attack team. That could be a decent way to go. You could go for another resist. Personally, I wouldn't go that way. I think he's a character that just needs a little bit of tankiness. He is a double down windowless in terms of like he can have absolute defense on his weapon and he's got absolute defense in his skills. So he has two blocks on potential procs basically. So he's got a good chance of absolute defense actually proccing and just blocking all damage. But that doesn't block things like burn, that doesn't block things like bleed. So I generally would go with HP on HP in this slot. Obviously try and go with a platinum mod if you have one, but in these situations, the way I see it is you build the kit and then this is a primary character for you. If you get the platinum drops in platinum mods, it's just an instant upgrade. I do this personally all the time, so it's not terrible to go with gold. But you could potentially go offset here, because the difference between a 23 to 25% platinum mod offset and a 10% to 12% onset, you're definitely going to get a bigger HP boost offset. But I'm just going to keep it as is, just like so you understand what I'm doing. So we've hit apply on the combat mods, and these are the combat mods I would ideally do. Like I said, if you want to use them on attack and defense teams. If you want to just use them on attack teams, you want to just switch that setup to attack only. And I'd pretty much keep it the same, although you might want to go for attack versus a trait if you do want to amplify his signature move. But personally, I don't think he needs it just because he's got aggro. You just want to maybe increase his survivability potential. If you are going to be attacking very particular teams with him, then you can decide which defense versus you're going to do. So if you want to attack Barker teams, you know it's going to be strong and you know it's also going to be tough. So you might want to go for defense versus strong like I have here, because there's going to be strong characters on a Barker team. Who would have thought it? Now when it comes to Zachary's base weapon, this is what it looks like on base, and I think his base weapon is actually pretty good. I would just increase the attack to 40%, make it a 5-star weapon, then increase the attack to 50% and try and get 1535. This is good for attack and defense because it's giving like defensive stats. Unfortunately, it is defense on the weapon and not HP. That would have been nicer. But the absolute defense on there is just nice from base. If you do have a side weapon that has attack, HP, and 1535 on it, that's also a good one to put in it. Like HP is the better stat for him to have in his hands generally, because absolute defense has just like 100% reduction, and then the HP would be like countering the bleed and burn potential. So you can see for my team, I've got this weapon so far. I've got 50% attack boost, 25% defense, and I haven't managed to get the 1535. Fortunately, I do have another weapon on in my hands that I've got with basically the same sort of deal. It doesn't have as much attack, so I do want to get that 1535 on the top weapon, ideally. And then sometimes I use a 20% AP to self weapon. It really depends on what I want to do. If I want to rush quickly with Zachary, really, he isn't that kind of character. He isn't a Rosita, he isn't a Lydia, he isn't a character you're wanting to rush quickly. He's a character that you just want to have a high attack stat. That's why that 50% attack on the base weapon is actually pretty good, because that is the thing that will increase his passive bleed. Okay, so we have got Zachary in a team here, and this is just to show you the offensive stats that he's going to have on a defense team if you have no 1535s around him. I have put a 1535 40% attack weapon in his hands that you saw before. On a defense team, he's primarily never going to have 1535s around him, so he's never going to be boosted. However, on an attack team, he potentially could. You're going to have a leader with a 1535 in the hand, and he's going to have another character, another teammate next to him with another 1535 weapon. So once you get those characters next to him and the weapons in their hands, you can see his attack stat gets boosted to a nice little 70k. I think you can get 70 to 80k pretty easily, depending on the grade you get him to. Mine's only grade 5. I haven't gone in for the limit breaks. You're going to get some extra stats there, so I think you could probably push his attack stat up to 80,000. This is going to be, giving you, small amounts of extra bleed, but it's just primarily good to have him surrounded by 1535s. Grade 5 means you're going to get everything basically to the minimum, what I would say is to a good standard. So this is how to do it in terms of getting the best out of his attack stat on an attack team, and will obviously make his bleed as high as it potentially could be. It is worth noting, if you are a fan of the strong attacks weapon, again, this does not amplify the bleed in any way. It is exactly what I said before, where it's that stat, 70,677. If you can manipulate that right now on this screen, that is the only thing that will change his passive. It is worth noting that there are certain leaders in the game which can reduce his bleed damage before the fight starts, like Barker. Barker's lead skill does actually stop Zachary's bleed from being as powerful. So you might want to go for attack down resist against Barker teams. So we come up against the team and you can see the bleed damage that I do is 22,800, just under 23k. You can see I am getting a strong attacks buff, but this is not changing how much damage that his bleed's doing. It's only going to change other characters, passives and stuff like that. For instance, Andrea 2000 gets buffed by this, but Zachary does not. Zachary's buff with the 30% is just going to come in, and it's just going to buff the fact that he has got decent damage. And he does have damage that just gets stronger and stronger as the fight goes on. But this is the main thing about Zachary. The next turn comes in and the bleed comes out, potentially taking out characters, especially if comboed with the right characters like Andrea here with the burn. You can take out characters on the second turn. And then Zachary's rush is quite powerful in itself. And basically, you've got characters that potentially want to control. You've got characters that you potentially want to control. But Zachary is someone who can just come in and nuke. His rush is good. His signature move is good. I would generally say the way I played it just there was not the best way to do it. I should have potentially used his signature move instead to bring up a Guardian Shield. But this is just how to get through teams. This is a high kill potential team. You see those 4 damage dealers on this defense team. So the likeliness of me surviving with a lot of characters alive is very small. This is very, very regular occurrence to me. 3 characters alive, Negan, Wayland, and Zachary being those characters. And that's why I've got that bleed mod on Zachary. So that's just my thoughts on how I've built my Zachary. I do get a lot of questions about how I've done Zachary. And I will probably in the future use him with an Alice leader, because as you noticed, I'm having characters get taken out when I don't really want characters to get taken out. Whereas Alice has a revive that I can do at the end, basically, before things, really go bad. I could pick up Andrea, get some more points in war. Long term, obviously, you want to increase survivability on teams, because it does increase the amount of points you get with war attacks and stuff like that. But right now it's very difficult to do that, as you may know. Zachary is one of the main reasons for that as well, because of having to take S classes on attack teams. But that's he is kind of hard countered in those situations, but there's so much you have to do to counter this guy. So it's still very worth having him on your teams, because if someone doesn't do any sort of counters towards Zachary, he is annihilating your teams. You know how powerful he is. Let me know in the comments down below how you intend to build him. Are you primarily using for all-out attack, all-out defense, or are you trying to make that balanced build? Is there anything you've spotted with Zachary that could potentially work? Remember, as much as I'm giving you my thoughts and my guide, like my starter guide towards this character, I always look at other people's thoughts as well, because, that's how the game works. We share information, we share ideas, and we see what we can come up with when it comes to to a nice character builds. But otherwise, I hope this little starter guide was useful for you. That is the end of my video. I want to thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.